Welcome back to the Discount Property Investor Podcast. Our mission is to share what we have learned from our experience and the experience of others to help you make more money investing like a pro. We want to teach you how to create wealth by investing in real estate the Discount Property Investor way. To jumpstart your real estate investing career, visit freewholesalecourse.com, the most complete free course on wholesaling real estate ever. Thanks for tuning in.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Discount Property Investor Podcast. I am your host, David Dodge, and today is episode 301, and we are going to be talking about running comps on properties the right way. And the reason that I want to add in the right way is because a lot of people will just go pull comps that are similar in size within a half a mile or a 1 mile radius. And if you're out in the country, that may be the only way to run comps. But if you are within any populated area, in a county or a city or a metro, and there are a lot of houses in the vicinity, the right way to run comps is to try to find properties that are as like as possible to the subject property, but also as close as possible, as well as have recently as possible been sold. So the reason that, again, that I want to highlight how to run comps or running comps on properties and doing it the right way is because if you are new at this, you might not know. Or maybe you've been in the game for a little bit and you are still having trouble with this or struggling with this. So let's just break it down in this episode. Keep it simple. We're going to start with what it is, right? What are comps? Well, comps are comparables. It's just an abbreviation for comparables. And comparables are how we determine what a subject property will be worth, not is worth, will be worth once we fix it up. So we're going to look at the comparable properties, the properties that are in the area, hopefully very close by, hopefully very, very similar. You don't want to compare a 3-story house to a single-story house or a ranch house to a split-level house. These are different types of houses. So you want to try to find as like as possible. You want to try to find as close in square footage as possible. You can't comp a 700 square foot property to a 2,600 square foot property. They're not like each other enough. Okay? You also want to try to comp properties that have similar beds and similar baths. Now, we could take this to another level and we could say that we could want to comp properties that are also going to be within the same school district and or the same zip code. Now, again, if you're out in the country or out in an area where you may not have a lot of properties around yours, or maybe you're trying to comp a farm. Well, in that case, yeah, you may have to try to find comps that are a little bit farther away. But typically, I like to start with a quarter of a mile when I'm comping properties that are in the county or the metro or the city limits. So I start with a quarter mile. Next, I will start typically with 200 to 300 square feet above and below. So if my property is 1,200, well, I'm going to look for properties that are 1,100 to 1,400. I'm going to go 200 square feet above and below and try to find properties similar. I'm also going to typically start with the last 6 months of solds. And I run a lot of my comps right now on PropStream. And if you want a free trial, go to davelikesdata.com. DaveLikesData.com. DaveLikesData.com will direct you to a 7-day free trial that you can get over on PropStream. I also run comps using my local MLS. And I also run comps on batch leads from time to time. And you can also get a trial over there at batchleads.io/Dave. Great resources, great tools to run your comps. You can even use Zillow to run comps if you are able to find some sold properties on the app or the website that are very similar to your property and have sold within the last 6 months in the last quarter mile. So that is the best way. That is the right way to run comps. Find properties that are like yours. Again, don't try to comp a property that's 800 square foot or 700 square foot to one that's 2,600 square foot. It's not the same type. Also, don't comp 2 stories to split levels or to ranches. Try to find similar properties. And I like to start within a quarter mile. Now, if you don't find any comps within a quarter mile that are similar in type, similar in bed count, similar in bath count, and similar in square footage, then what you can do is you can start looking a little bit outside of those. But typically your best comps, the best ones, are going to be within 200 to 300 square foot. They're going to have the same number of beds and baths. They're going to be the same type of property. They're going to be a recent sold property, ideally sold on the MLS, because that would mean it would be a higher comp. Not always, but it should. MLS pretty much means retail. And also comps within the same school district or the same zip code, because those are going to be the most like your subject property. Now, if you can't find comps on your subject property, here's what you can do. Go from a quarter mile to a half a mile. A half a mile to maybe 3/4 of a mile. 3/4 of a mile to a mile. But go slow. Don't make big leaps here. Go from a quarter mile to maybe 0.4 miles first, and then go to 0.5, and then to 0.6. You want to try to keep your comp as close in proximity to the subject property you're trying to find comparables for as possible. It's very, very important. That might be the most important, is the proximity. Next would be your size. You don't typically want to try to comp a 4-bedroom to a 2-bedroom or a 5-bedroom to a 3-bedroom. You always want to try to find comps that are going to be equal with beds. However, if your subject property has the ability to make an additional bedroom somewhere in the house, maybe by putting up a wall or egressing a concrete window or a basement window to add a bedroom and make it legal, then in that case, you are able to go and comp against a different bedroom because you're basically going to try to get yours to be very similar to that. Also, what you can do if you're not finding great comps is you can extend the sold date. So I start with a quarter mile, 200 to 300 square foot, same exact bed count, same type. And I also start with a half a year or 6 months of solds. But if I can't find a couple good comps in the last 6 months, then I will expand my duration. So when were these comparables sold? I may expand that out to 3/4 of a year or 1 year. But the best comps are going to be the closest, the most recent, and the most similar in size and type, period. Okay, so I just want to make sure that everybody's aware. The best comps are going to be the ones that are close by, similar in size, similar in type, and have sold very, very recently. So some of the things you can do is you can expand your radius in terms of your distance. You can expand your radius in terms of your time. Go from 6 months to 10 months or to 12 months or to 15 months. But again, you don't want to do that if you don't have to. And then another thing you can do is you can expand your square footage. Now, be careful when you expand your square footage. 200 to 300 square foot plus or minus is going to be okay. However, if your subject property is 600 square feet, that's a small property. Adding 300 square foot to that property means that you are going to be pulling comparables that might be 50% bigger. If you find a 900 square foot house and you're comping it to a 600 square foot house, that's 50% bigger. So when you are doing your plus and minus on your square foot, the bigger your subject property is, the bigger you can allow your range to be. So if I'm trying to comp a property that's 600 square foot, I'm probably not going to look at any comp that's over 750 or 800 square feet, because it's just, you're getting into a whole different type of house, a bigger house. Now, if your subject property is 1,800 square foot or 2,000 square foot, you might be able to go above the 300 square foot. Then you might be able to go to 350 or even 400. But ideally, you're going to be within 200 to 300 square feet. Ideally, you are going to be in a quarter mile. And ideally, you are going to have comps that have sold recently within the last 6 months. But if you can't find comps for those ideal situations, again, you can expand your horizons with your duration, with your bed and bath size or your square foot size, or the time in which it takes to find the comp that's sold. So a 6-month, 10-month, 12-month, so on and so forth. Pro tip here: start small and recent. It doesn't really do us any good to go a mile out in the middle of the city and find 1,200 comps. That's an exaggeration, but 40 or 50 or 70. You don't need that many comps. Ideally, I'm looking for 2 to 3 really good comps. Reason being is the comps are going to matter for multiple reasons. One, you need to determine what you think your subject property will be worth once you fix it up. So you know whenever you go to sell it or get it appraised that you're going to be in the ballpark of what you anticipated. So if you were going to sell the property, you may not need an appraisal, but your buyer might. And if you intend to keep the property as a rental, you are still going to have to get a loan most likely, and you're going to need that appraisal again. And that appraiser, when he is determining what your property is worth, is going to do the exact same thing. They're going to go and they're going to try to find comps in the local area. The closer, the better. The more recent, the better. And the more like the property in bed count, bath count, square footage count, maybe even lot size. Again, you don't want to comp property that is not comparable. So a 1/4 acre lot isn't a good comp to a 2-acre lot. So the right way to do comps is to find properties that are the most like your subject property and the closest to that property and the most similar and the most alike. And these comps that you're finding, you want them to be the most recent. The more recent, the better. Now, some of the issues that I've had over the years when it comes to running comps have sometimes been hidden. And I want to talk about some of these things really quickly before we wrap up. Number one is school districts. School districts may change in the middle of a neighborhood. It may not be a major intersection or a major highway. So you want to be aware when you are comping properties that they are in the same school district. Now, if your market has very, very similar schools all across the county or the area or the city, then it may not be as big of a deal. But if you go from one school district to the next, and it's a way better or way worse school district, that is going to change the value of the property. Another thing that may change the value of a property is if it is on a major road. You do not want to comp a property that's on a 4-lane road or a boulevard that may even be 5 lanes to a property that is back in the back of a neighborhood or in the middle of a neighborhood on a street that's quiet. Typically, a more quiet street is more desirable, which means you are going to have a more or a higher ARV typically. Typically what I like to look at is for any lane that a house is on over 2, I'm taking between $5,000 and $10,000 off the purchase price in terms of my value and what I think it's worth. So I mentioned school districts. Keep an eye on your school districts. I mentioned busy roads. Busy roads are going to be less desirable than ones back in the neighborhood. So again, try to find comps that are equal or similar to your property. Another thing may be a zip code. Zip codes, again, may or may not change from a busy intersection. It may be in the middle of a neighborhood, or one side of a street is one zip code or one school district than the other. So when running comps, you want to try to find the most like yours as possible, and being in the same zip code may make a difference. Also, furthermore, if it's near a river or a lake or a stream or a creek, check to see if your property is in a flood zone or if the comps are in a flood zone, because they may or may not be good comps if they are and you're not, or vice versa. So those are just some of the things that kind of can be hidden from you if you're not a pro at running comps. School districts, zip codes, flood plains. And then there's also things that I kind of mentioned a little bit ago about, lot size. You don't want to be comping a 2-acre lot to a 1/4 acre lot. So you're going to want to try to find as like property as possible, as close in size as possible, and as recent in terms of when it sold last as possible. Those are going to make for the absolute best comps. Now, there are some other things that I want to mention before we wrap up. Next would be amenities. If your house has a 2-car attached garage, but it also has a 2-car detached garage, then that is going to have more value than if it didn't have that additional 2-car detached garage. So what you are going to want to do is you are going to want to add a little bit of value to the subject property if it has that garage. Other things could be sun porches or screened-in porches, or 4-season rooms. It could be basements, could be carports, it could be sheds. All of these things are going to matter when you're doing comps. So if your property has an additional 2-car detached garage, look at your comps and see if they also have that. Maybe that neighborhood that those comps are in, or that property's in, that's the standard. Well, maybe you have comps that don't have that garage, or they do. You're going to want to adjust the price of that subject property up or down depending on if it has it or not, and if the comps do. Things like pools or hot tubs that may be, left behind or included with the home. Those things may increase or decrease values. And again, you are going to want to find comps that are very similar to your subject property. So to do it the right way, running comps the right way, doing it like a pro, you need to take your time. You need to find properties that are very close in proximity. You need to find properties that are very much like your property in terms of type of house, number of stories, number of square footage, number of beds, number of baths, maybe even the size of the lot. And then you're going to want to find comps that have sold recently. Start with 6 months or less. If you can't find any from there, maybe go to a year. And then from there, you can go from a 1/4 mile to a 1/2 mile, and maybe even expand your square footage if needed. But in a perfect world, we are not adjusting our duration and or our distance. We are starting with a 1/4 mile and we're ending with a 1/4 mile. We're starting with 200 to 300 square foot plus or minus. And we're starting with 6 months or less on those solds to find and determine the best ARV. And that's the whole reason we run comps, is to find the after repair value of your property. And then we determine how much the repairs are going to be. And then we're going to then determine what a fair market value price would be once we know those two things. But we can't determine a fair market value price until we know the ARV and the repairs. You just can't do it. So again, you got to get good at running comps, guys. Check out Dave Likes Data. davelikesdata.com, davelikesdata.com. It'll get you a 7-day free trial of PropStream. It's one of my favorite and easiest to use. They even have an app. I run comps on the fly all the time from my cell phone. You can use Zillow. You can even use batchleads.io/Dave. They have a comping tool that has actually been getting really good lately, and I use that as well. So guys, learn how to do it the right way. It's not that hard. Keep it simple. Don't overthink it. You got this. Thanks for listening. Signing off.
Thanks for listening to the Discount Property Investor Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe to help us reach a wider audience. To jumpstart your real estate investing career, visit freewholesalecourse.com, the most complete free course on wholesaling real estate ever. We would also appreciate it if you left us a review on iTunes or Stitcher. Thank you in advance for your support. And remember, you make your money when you buy, you get paid when you sell. Now let's go build some wealth.